I'm Amber Mitchell, 24 years old, and I was sitting alone at the most expensive restaurant in the city, staring at a $12,000 bill. I couldn't pay. My hands were shaking as I read the note tucked into the leather folder, written in my father's familiar, sharp handwriting. It said, "Let's see how failure finds her way out of this one. Consider it life training." The crystal glasses on the table sparkled under the chandeliers, like none of this was out of the ordinary. Around me, everyone laughed and clinked forks over filet mignon. I couldn't breathe before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like and subscribe button if you've ever been left behind by the very people who were supposed to love you most. I was born into a family that considered pressure a parenting style. My parents, Lauren and Jason Mitchell, weren't just successful. They were admired, envied even. They built their real estate business from the ground up, and they wore that legacy. Like armor, our house had 5 bedrooms, marble countertops, and a spiral staircase. My mother always made sure it was spotless in case someone from the club dropped by without warning. I used to think I was lucky, but I was never really a daughter in that house. I was a project, maybe a billboard from the time I could hold a pencil. I loved to draw, not silly things, but buildings, light shadows, spaces that felt quiet and alive. I was quiet too. That didn't go over well in a house like ours, where performance was everything. When I forgot my lines during a school play at 7, my mother made me recite them every night for a week by the fireplace. When I placed second in a spelling bee at 12, I got more vocabulary drills and fewer dinners with my friends. My parents didn't believe in celebrating effort, only results, and even then it was never quite enough. An A- in calculus led to hushed conversations over the kitchen island about whether I was distracted or falling behind, but I loved art more than anything else. I worked hard and graduated with a perfect GPA, had offers from Ivy Leagues. But when I chose the Rhode Island School of Design over Princeton, my father pushed his chair back and left the table. My mother just sighed and asked why I would throw away my future on paint and paper. They paid for school, though they always reminded me of that. Whenever the conversation turned to money, they said they supported me, but they made it clear they expected a return on investment, preferably in the form of giving up art and going to business school. Instead, after graduation, I moved to Chicago, took a job at a modest but well-respected gallery. I rented a tiny studio apartment and stocked it with paintbrushes instead of flatware. I wasn't rich, but I was proud. Then came the layoffs and the eviction notice that followed. I had no choice but to call home. My parents let me move back in, but it was on their terms. They made rules, curfews, check-ins, chore charts, even career. Planning meetings, I was 24, but I felt 12 again. Every rejection email was met with a knowing look or another suggestion that I finally applied to Wharton. 3 months after moving back, my father told me we had dinner plans. He said we'd be dining with business partners at Lucille, the kind of place that didn't list prices on the menu. He told me to wear something appropriate and added that this could be a good networking opportunity if I didn't embarrass them. We drove there in silence. My mother adjusted my hair in the back seat and muttered something about how first impressions matter. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a setup, and by the time dessert was supposed to arrive, I'd be sitting alone at that white linen table with my parents gone and a mountain of debt in front of me. We pulled up in front of Lucille just before 7. The valet opened the door before I could reach for the handle, and my parents stepped out like royalty, returning to their usual table. My mother paused to fix a stray strand of hair near my ear, frowning as she smoothed it into place. "You could have worn something with more shape," she said, barely above a whisper. I gave a nod and followed them into the lobby. The elevator was private marble floor, golden trim. My father stood silent, checking his phone. When the doors opened, we were met by a maitre d' who greeted my father by name. "Right this way, Mr. Mitchell," he said with a practiced smile. The restaurant was quiet, in that expensive way, low lights, clinking glasses, voices, just loud enough to suggest power without showing it. We were led to a corner table already set for 6. 2 of the chairs were occupied by a couple in their late 50s, Scott and Heather Thompson. My father had mentioned them before longtime partners in a few development deals. They stood when we approached. Handshakes, cheek kisses, polite compliments about how lovely everything looked. My father gestured toward me. This is our daughter Amber. She's staying with us for a bit while she transitions between opportunities. I smiled, extended my hand. Nice to meet you. Heather nodded. My niece had a similar stretch after college. She's in law school now. We sat. Napkins were unfolded menus offered. My father handed the wine list to Scott and leaned back in his chair. We're celebrating tonight, he said. Closed the Westridge deal this afternoon. They clinked glasses and offered toasts. I sipped water and studied the menu. Appetizers started at $80. Main courses crossed into triple digits fast. I searched for the lowest-priced entree I could find, settling on a modest sea bass. You can get whatever you like, my father said without looking up. It's a special evening. They ordered without hesitation Kobe beef black truffle risotto foie gras. My mother requested a specific caviar that wasn't even listed. I kept quiet, hoping no one would notice my discomfort. Throughout the appetizers, I tried to join the conversation. I mentioned a recent exhibit I had helped curate at the gallery in Chicago. My mother changed the subject to Bali, where the Thompsons had just returned from vacation. By the main course, I gave up. I focused on the plate in front of me and let the conversation drift past. The sea bass was delicate, perfectly cooked, the kind of meal that took 3 bites to finish but cost more than my grocery budget for a week. Halfway through the meal, my father's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, then turned to Scott. It's Jenkins. I need to step out for this. My mother folded her napkin. I'll powder my nose. Heather joined me. The 3 of them stood and walked away without another word. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I sent a text. Everything okay? No response. At the 45-minute mark, a server approached with dessert menus. Will your party be returning soon, he asked. I think so, I said, though my throat felt tight. They stepped out for a call. He nodded and left. A few minutes later, he returned, not with dessert, but with a leather folder. In the meantime, he said, placing it gently beside me, the gentleman asked me to give this to you. I opened it slowly. The number on the bill was dizzying, $12,459.87. Below it, in my father's sharp handwriting, was a note. Let's see how failure finds her way out of this one. Consider it life training. I read it again. The black ink didn't smudge. The paper didn't vanish. This was real. I pulled out my phone and tried to call him. Straight to voicemail. I called my mother. Same. I tried texting. The messages showed as delivered, but not read. Then both numbers blocked me. I couldn't understand how, not even for them. This wasn't discipline or guidance. This was a public spectacle, a setup meant to humiliate. The manager approached. Miss Mitchell, is everything all right with your dining experience tonight? There's been a misunderstanding, I said, keeping my voice steady. My parents. They stepped away, but they're handling the bill. He didn't blink. Your father called earlier. He was very clear you'd be responsible for payment. I shook my head. I can't pay this. I understand, he said carefully, but if no payment can be arranged, we may need to involve the authorities. The word authorities sank into me like ice. I imagined police officers showing up, walking me out in front of all these polished diners. Can I call someone, I asked, try to work something out? Of course, he said, stepping back, but I'll need an update soon. I called Riley. She answered on the second ring. I need help, I said. They left me here with a bill, over $12,000. She paused. Amber, I can send you $200. That's literally all I have till payday. It's something I said. Thank you. After hanging up, I tried my Aunt Jennifer. She was always softer than the others. Oh, honey, she said when I explained. That sounds exactly like something your mother would do. I wish I could help, but I'm in Europe right now. I stared at the table. Other guests were starting to notice. A couple glanced over, whispered. The sting of shame settled into my chest. Connor, the manager, returned. Any luck? I nodded slowly. A little, but not enough. Do you have anything else of value? He asked, glancing toward my purse. Jewelry collateral. No, I said, then paused. I have my portfolio. He raised an eyebrow. I'm an artist. I brought some work. I was hoping, I swallowed hard, to show them. May I see it? He asked. I reached beside my chair and pulled up the leather case. Inside were 6 pieces cityscapes in charcoal and watercolor. I laid them on the table. He leaned in, studying one of the dusk scenes with narrow alleys and fire escapes. These are good, he said, his voice quieter now. You did these? I nodded. You studied architecture urban design at RISD. His face shifted. My brother went there. He owns a gallery, actually, downtown. I watched as he carefully turned each page, asking questions about line work, shading, lighting. Finally, he looked up. Would you mind if I called him? I hesitated, then said, Please. As he stepped away, I glanced back down at the receipt. It was still there. But for the first time since it landed in front of me, I wasn't completely alone. Connor returned after several minutes, holding his phone loosely in one hand. He gave me a small nod before sitting across from me again. Tyler's on his way, he said. He's curious. I told him about your work and how you ended up here tonight. I nodded, trying to hold on to that sliver of calm, but the weight of the situation pressed harder with every passing second. My water glass was nearly empty. My phone buzzed once Riley had sent over the $200 she promised. I stared down at the payment app, a drop in a very deep bucket, but it felt like something solid in a room full of moving parts. I sent her a thank you message and put the phone face down. Do you think Tyler might actually be interested? I asked, not quite looking up. Connor didn't answer right away. He's not the kind to waste his time. If he shows up, it means he sees something worth showing up for. I folded my hands in my lap, unsure how to respond. Somewhere across the restaurant, silverware clinked softly against china. A low hum of conversation filled the spaces between piano notes. About 15 minutes later, I saw him, Tyler. He stepped in through the side entrance dressed in a button-down and dark jeans, his hair slightly windblown like he'd rushed over. He made his way to our table with easy steps, and as soon as he reached us, Connor stood to greet him. This is Amber, he said. She's the artist I told you about. Tyler reached across the table and shook my hand. Nice to meet you, he said. Connor said you had some work with you. I opened the leather case and laid the portfolio across the table. He didn't sit, just leaned in, studying each page slowly. He didn't rush or skim. With every new piece he grew quieter, his brow furrowed in thought. This one, he said, pausing at a nightscape. The reflection work in the windows. How did you build that layering dry brush over wet ink, I said, then added detail with a blade once it dried. He nodded, flipping to the next. RISD. Yes. Graduated last year. Tyler kept turning, asking short questions. I answered them all. He looked up at last. These are strong, really strong. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I'd like to feature them, he continued. Not just one or two, the whole set has cohesion, but I'd also like to buy 2 tonight. I blinked. You want to buy them now? Yes, he said. I can wire part of the payment immediately. Might take a day or 2 to process the rest. Connor gave a small nod quietly, excusing himself to speak with the restaurant manager. I looked down at the pieces Tyler had marked. They were part of a series I'd poured weeks into. I hadn't imagined selling them this way over white tablecloths and half-empty wine glasses. I was hoping to use those in a future show, I said. They were kind of the anchor for a theme I've been building. I understand, he said, gently closing the portfolio. But they're also the pieces that make me confident in what you can do next. It's not just a purchase. It's a starting point. I nodded. My chest was tight, but not in panic. Just then, Connor returned. Management agreed to a 15% courtesy reduction, given the unusual circumstances. Even with that discount and Tyler's offer, I was still short. I knew exactly how short, about $2,000. As I worked out the math in my head, I felt a presence near the table. Excuse me, a man said, his voice calm but firm. I hope I'm not intruding. We all looked up. An older couple stood there. The man, maybe early 70s, wore a navy blazer with gold buttons. The woman beside him smiled kindly. I'm Frank Wilson, he said. This is my wife Doris. We've been dining at Lucille for decades, and we couldn't help but overhear. My stomach turned with fresh embarrassment. I opened my mouth to apologize, but Frank held up a hand. Don't apologize. We've never seen anything like this. It's disgraceful. And frankly, I don't think it reflects on you at all. Doris reached over and gently touched my hand. My parents weren't supportive either, she said. They thought nursing was beneath me. It wasn't as cruel as what you're dealing with, but the feeling's familiar. Connor cleared his throat politely, giving them space. Frank turned to him. How much is still owed? Connor hesitated. Just under $2,000, sir. We'll take care of it, Frank said without hesitation. I sat straighter. I can't let you do that. Then consider it a loan. Doris said, her voice light but steady. You can repay us however and whenever you'd like, or not at all. But on one condition. I nodded, waiting. You don't go back there tonight, Frank said. To the people who did this to you. You come stay with us. We have a guest house that's been empty since our nephew left for college. It's quiet, and it's yours if you want it. I couldn't speak. Tyler gently closed the case and handed it back to me. You have somewhere to stay, he said, and you have buyers for your work. Connor looked over the final receipt before processing the payment. My phone lit up again. This time it was my father calling. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I could hear Frank and Doris talking softly, Tyler confirming a wire transfer. The whole restaurant had moved on, but I hadn't. Not yet. I tapped the green button and brought the phone to my ear. Did you learn your lesson? My father asked. I took a breath. Yes. But not the one you meant me to. The silence that followed told me everything. My father's voice on the phone still rang in my ears as I stepped outside. The city was quieter than I expected for a Saturday night. A breeze came up off the sidewalk and cooled the heat, still sitting on the back of my neck. Tyler stood beside the valet stand, hands in his pockets. When he saw me, he nodded toward the curb. You ready? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. We drove in silence for a while. My phone buzzed again in my lap. I didn't check it. I knew whose name I'd see. I'll wait in the car while you pack, Tyler said as we pulled up in front of my parents' house. Take your time, or I can come with you if you want backup. Just wait outside, I said. I won't be long. The house was lit up like they were expecting company. I used my key knowing it would be the last time. My mother was in the hallway before I could shut the door. She looked me over, then reached out, touching my arm like she hadn't spent the evening ignoring my texts. Amber, she said. Thank goodness. We were worried sick. Were you? I asked, stepping past her and heading toward the stairs. Because you didn't act worried. My father came out of his study. Now listen. No, I said. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to get my things. They followed me up the stairs. I kept my back to them as I packed. My clothes, art supplies, my favorite books. I left the designer shoes and handbags, the watch they'd given me at graduation. I took the quilt my grandmother made when I was 13. They kept talking. About lessons. About how I needed to grow up. About how they were trying to help me. I didn't answer. When my bag was zipped, I turned and looked at them both. You wanted me to learn how to stand on my own, I said. Well, I have. Where will you go? My mother asked. Her voice had lost its usual sharpness. Somewhere I'm seen for who I am, I said. Not punished for who I'm not. My father's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. Without us, you have nothing. I paused at the top of the stairs. Without you, I finally have myself. I walked down slowly, not looking back. Outside, Tyler stood by the car trunk open. I loaded my bags without a word. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I caught one last glimpse of my parents framed in the front doorway watching me leave. More than ready, I said when Tyler asked. Frank and Doris were waiting with the porch light on. Their house sat on a quiet street lined with trees and brick mailboxes. The guest house was tucked behind the main home, a converted carriage house with ivy along one side and string lights above the path. Doris opened the back gate. Come on in, sweetheart, she said. Let me show you around. The space was small, but clean and warm. Exposed beams, a little kitchenette windows that overlooked a small flower garden, a twin bed with a blue quilt, a bookshelf filled with paperbacks, and a deep armchair in the corner. I can't stay here for free, I said as I set my bag down. At least let me pay rent. We'll talk about that later, Frank said. Tonight you need to rest. After they left, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on my knees. My phone buzzed again. I checked once, then muted the notifications. I sent a single text, I'm safe. I need space. The room was still. My body ached in places I didn't expect. I pulled the blanket over my legs and tried to sleep. I drifted in and out until morning. The sunlight poured in through the window. I sat up unsure where I was for a second. Then I remembered the gallery, the bill, the walkout. That afternoon, Tyler met me at the gallery. It was smaller than the one I'd worked at in Chicago, but it had more personality. Clean brick walls, polished concrete floors, shelves of brochures along the far wall. "This way," he said, unlocking a door near the back. The studio space was narrow, but bright, skylights above, a long table for laying out pieces, shelves for supplies. "I can work here?" I asked. "It comes with the job," he said. "It's part-time for now, some admin work helping at shows managing inventory, but I think it's a good fit." I stood in the middle of the room trying to imagine it filled with color. "I can start tomorrow," I said. "Good," he said, smiling. "We'll get you a key." That night, Doris left a casserole on the guest house counter with a handwritten note. "Welcome home." I texted her a thank you, and she replied immediately. "Join us for dinner tomorrow. We'd love to hear about your art." We ate at their kitchen table, dishes passed in quiet rhythm. They asked questions about my time in Chicago, my classes at RISD, what I hope to create next. Over pie. Doris looked at me gently. "Family is complicated," she said. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop asking people to be someone they're not." Frank nodded. "Control isn't the same as care. It took me years to understand the difference." That night I slept deeper. At the gallery the next morning, Tyler introduced me to Maya, the assistant manager. She showed me how to log inventory, file artist contracts, and prepare for installations. The routine helped. Evenings were spent in the studio. I painted slowly, not thinking too far ahead. The pieces took shape quietly. The calls from my parents didn't stop. Then came the emails, then messages through Riley. I replied once a week. "I'm safe, I'm working, I'm not ready to talk." 2 weeks after the dinner at Lucille, I sold my first piece through Tyler's gallery. It was a quiet moment. A woman walked in, browsed for 15 minutes, then pointed at one of my cityscapes. "I'd like this one," she said. Tyler looked over at me. I nodded. He wrapped the piece while I processed the payment. After she left, he handed me a receipt with my name printed at the bottom. "We should celebrate," he said. We walked to a small cafe around the corner, shared a slice of lemon cake, and talked about nothing important. When I returned to the guest house that evening, I set a fresh canvas on the easel. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. At the end of my 3rd week at the gallery, Tyler called me into his office. He held a small stack of paperwork, but his tone was casual. "How would you feel about prepping a few pieces for the next group show?" he asked. I sat down across from his desk. "Mine?" He nodded. "Just a few to start. I think your cityscapes would balance out some of the abstract work we've got coming in." That evening, I stayed after hours to select 3 pieces. I spread them across the floor of the studio and studied them in the soft overhead light. The lines, the layering, the quiet pull of each image, none of it felt accidental anymore. The following week, Maya helped me mount them for display. She didn't say much, but before walking out, she turned back and said, "They feel like places I've stood." That's rare. On opening night, I kept to the edge of the room. Guests moved slowly, drink glasses in hand, stopping to linger at the work. Tyler introduced me to a collector from Evanston who asked about my process. I kept my answers brief. He nodded, then pointed at one of my older pieces. "I'll take that one," he said. Later that evening, I sold a second piece to a couple who ran a design firm. They mentioned using original artwork in some of their lobby spaces. I handed them my card and smiled, unsure what else to say. After the show, Tyler and I walked to a late-night diner 2 blocks away. We split a sandwich and a piece of chocolate pie. He told me stories about his first few years running the gallery, and I told him how I used to sketch city buses from my bedroom window when I was 12. We left just after midnight, and when I got back to the guest house, Doris had left a small plate of cookies by the door. A yellow Post-it note read, "Thought you might be hungry. Proud of you." By mid-month, I'd saved enough to start looking for my own place. Frank helped me scan rental listings over coffee one morning. He circled 3. Avoid anything that says cozy in all caps. That usually means no windows. I found a small apartment above a used bookstore. The kitchen sink leaned slightly left, and the walls needed paint, but the light from the front windows was perfect. I moved in with 2 suitcases, a folding table, and a second-hand easel. Doris sent me off with a pot of chili and a roll of painter's tape. On my second night there, Riley drove in and brought me a housewarming plant. She stood in the middle of the room and turned in a slow circle. "It smells like turpentine and dreams," she said, laughing. We sat on the floor and ate takeout noodles from the cartons. When she left, I stayed up late sketching the view from my bedroom window, just rooftops and wires, but something about it felt new. The next morning, I stepped into the gallery to find Tyler holding a clipboard. "Urban Night Series," he said, glancing up at me. "It's time." He pointed to a blank wall near the front of the gallery. "We'll feature it in the fall. Full solo show. You'll curate it yourself." I didn't answer right away. He smiled. "You've earned it." Planning the show took every spare hour. I painted during the day and reviewed framing options at night. Frank helped me mount mock-ups. Doris proofread my artist statement. The week before the opening, Riley came by to help clean the apartment. We dusted, reorganized, and sat down with 2 glasses of iced tea. "I still can't believe they did that to you," she said. "Not for the first time." "They haven't apologized," I said, folding a cloth napkin into a drawer. "They may never," she replied, "but you didn't wait for it. That counts." On the day of the exhibition, Tyler helped me hang the final pieces. We adjusted the lighting twice, moved a bench 3 inches left, and set a guest book on the front table. That evening, the gallery doors opened to a steady stream of visitors. I wore a deep green dress I'd found at a second-hand boutique and stood near the entrance with a glass of sparkling water. Frank and Doris arrived early, carrying a wrapped package. "For your desk," Doris said. Inside was a vintage paint box, scuffed wood brass latches, and a tiny hand-carved palette. "It belonged to my aunt," she said. "She painted sunsets in Arizona. Thought you might give it new life." I set it on the studio shelf the next morning. As guests mingled, I caught sight of Connor near the back wall. He stood beside a woman I assumed was his partner, both studying one of the original pieces from my restaurant portfolio. When I walked over, he smiled. "We still talk about that night," he said. "Figured it was time I owned one of these." "I'm glad you're here," I said. The gallery was full but calm. I walked between clusters of guests, answering questions, shaking hands. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I noticed the front door swing open. My parents stepped inside. They didn't move right away. My mother wore a gray coat over a navy dress. My father kept his hands in his pockets. Tyler noticed the shift in my expression. "Do you want me to ask them to leave?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." I stepped away from the crowd and toward the people who once called me failure. My shoes were quiet on the polished concrete floor. They stood near the entrance, not speaking. My mother held her purse with both hands, shoulders drawn tight. My father scanned the room like he was still trying to gauge who was worth talking to. I walked toward them slowly. When I reached them, I kept my voice even. "You came." "Of course we did," my mother said. "We wouldn't miss it." My father gestured to one of the larger canvases nearby. "This is very technical. Impressive detail. It sounded more like a business appraisal than a compliment." "Thank you," I said. "Feel free to look around. There's a lot to see." I turned, but my mother reached gently for my arm. "Amber, please, can we talk? We've been worried." I didn't pull away, but I didn't stay still either. "This is my night," I said, "not the time." My father's face tightened. "After everything we've done for you, you can't spare 5 minutes. I kept my tone low. "You mean like leaving me at a restaurant with a $12,000 bill, like blocking my calls after?" He exhaled sharply but said nothing. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. I glanced around at the people gathered nearby, noting a few lingering glances. "I'm not doing this here," I said quietly. "You're welcome to stay, enjoy the work. Or not. Either way, I'm fine." A woman across the room caught my eye, waving politely and pointing to a piece on the far wall. I nodded and stepped away without waiting for a response. As I walked, I passed Tyler, who offered a reassuring look. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I spent the rest of the evening speaking with guests, answering questions, watching pieces find new homes. One collector, an older man in a tweed jacket, bought 3 from the series. A young couple asked about commissioned work. Connor introduced me to a marketing executive who was looking for original art for a client's downtown office. I handed her my card, heart still steady. Later that evening, I noticed my parents near the back. They weren't speaking to anyone, just studying the pieces on the far wall. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. My father stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Neither of them approached me again. They left quietly without saying goodbye. The next day, Tyler handed me a sales summary. 15 pieces sold on opening night. One of them, a centerpiece from the Urban Night series, had been purchased by a prominent collector with ties to the local museum board. "This is just the beginning," Tyler said. I nodded. "I hope so." A few weeks later, I signed a lease for a larger studio in a converted factory building. Tall windows lined one side of the room. The old brick walls held heat in the winter and stayed cool through spring. I moved in on a Saturday morning with help from Frank and Doris. We carried in canvases, folding tables, brushes, and books. Doris unpacked a small box of supplies she'd collected for me: pencils, a tin of watercolors, a travel sketchbook she'd found at an estate sale. "We thought you might like a clean slate," she said. I spent that first afternoon sitting on the wooden floor planning my next series. The space felt like mine, not borrowed, not negotiated. Mine. Later that month, Tyler stopped by to see the new layout. He brought coffee and a printed flyer. "Urban Reflections," it read. "New work by Amber Mitchell, coming this spring." "You're serious?" I asked. "Very," he said. "This is your strongest work yet." The months passed quickly. I painted during the day and helped out at the gallery a few evenings a week. Riley visited often sometimes, just to sit on the studio floor and talk while I worked. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. My parents' number flashed across the screen. I paused before answering. "Amber," my mother asked. Her voice sounded smaller somehow. "We saw the announcement for your next show. We were hoping we could come." "It's open to the public," I said. "We were thinking maybe we could see it early, just the three of us, and maybe dinner after I didn't respond right away." I looked out the studio window. A delivery truck idled at the curb. Birds hopped along the power line. "I'm not ready for that," I said. "Maybe someday, but not yet." She was quiet, then said, "We just want to reconnect." "I know," I said, "but it has to happen differently." After we hung up, I turned off my phone and opened a fresh canvas. Outside, the light was beginning to change. The opening of Urban Reflections drew a larger crowd than we expected. Tyler had adjusted the lighting that morning to cast soft shadows across each canvas. He called it quiet depth, and I could see what he meant. The entire gallery had a kind of glow to it, as if the work itself had drawn the right people in. Frank and Doris were the first to arrive. Frank handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside was a vintage fountain pen. "For signing all those sale receipts," he said with a wink. Riley arrived not long after, arm in arm with her boyfriend, who immediately went for the wine table. She looked around, then turned back to me. "I knew this would be beautiful," she said, "but it's something else in person." Guests wandered in steadily: collectors, local artists, even a few gallery owners from nearby cities. Tyler stayed close, at first greeting people at the door, then circulating through the space to answer questions. Zach Forrester arrived around 7:30. We hadn't seen each other in years, not since graduation, but he still looked the same: tall, quiet, a little shy, until you got him talking about art. He found me near the window and gave a small wave. "Your work's grown up," he said, stepping closer. "There's a confidence in it now." I smiled. "It's been a long year. I'd say it's paid off," he said. Zach was in town to review shows for Art View and another publication. He walked the gallery twice that night, notebook in hand, stopping at nearly every piece in the back corner. A little after 8, my parents arrived. I spotted them the moment the door opened. My mother wore a structured black jacket, pearl earrings I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. My father followed behind her in his usual dark suit. Unlike the last show, they didn't hesitate. They walked directly into the crowd, smiling politely, nodding at people they recognized from past events or local functions. I stayed where I was. Zach noticed the shift and stepped a little closer. "Want me to clear the space?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Let them see it." My parents moved from painting to painting, their expressions hard to read. My mother took a brochure from the display table. My father paused longest in front of a rain-drenched alley scene 1 I had painted after a sleepless night in the studio. Eventually, they reached me. "You've done well," my father said. "We're impressed." I nodded. "Thanks." My mother glanced at Zach, then back at me. "We didn't expect such a turnout. The work is very polished." "This is Zach Forrester," I said. "We went to school together. He's reviewing the show." My father's eyes lit with curiosity. Forrester from Connecticut? Zach nodded. Senator Forrester's my uncle. That landed. I could see the shift in posture the way my father's tone warmed. He asked about Zach's publications, his plans in the city, whether he might be open to speaking at an event next spring. I let the exchange unfold. Then when there was a pause, I stepped in. I'm glad you came, I said. But I want to be clear. If you want to be part of my life again, it has to look different. My father's smile faltered. We've done a lot for you, Amber. Your education, your start. I'm grateful for what you provided, I said. But what I needed wasn't just money. I needed belief. I needed you to see me. My mother's voice softened. We pushed you because we believed in your potential. No, I said gently. You pushed because you wanted to control it. And when I didn't follow your path, you punished me for it. Tyler appeared just then holding a catalog. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, he said smoothly. Have you seen the write-up on Amber's work? Critics have been very enthusiastic. They nodded, accepting the booklet. My mother looked at me again. Perhaps we could meet for lunch next week. Just to talk, I'll check my schedule, I said. They moved on, eventually purchasing one small piece from the series. I watched them thank the gallery assistant and disappear into the crowd. When they were gone, Zach leaned in. You handled that well. I didn't say everything I wanted to, I said. You said what needed saying, he replied. As the evening wound down, I stood in front of my centerpiece, an image of a figure walking alone along a sidewalk lined with puddles. The reflections in the glass suggested movement, but the person kept walking forward. Zach stepped beside me. This one says everything he said. You didn't need words. The last guests filtered out. Tyler locked the door behind them. Maya began collecting empty glasses and brochures. I stayed still, holding the quiet in my hands. The gallery lights dimmed slowly after the last guest left. I stayed by the window, watching the glow of street lamps spill across the sidewalk outside. Tyler handed me a cup of tea before locking the front door. Zach had already gone, promising to send the review draft the next morning. Doris had left a voicemail saying the show was pure grace on canvas, and Frank texted me a photo of the vintage pen next to the exhibition catalog. I stood in front of the final piece, my favorite. A single figure painted in deep cobalt walked down a quiet avenue at dusk. Not hurried, not lost, just steady. A few days later, Tyler offered me a more permanent role gallery partner. It came with a share in decisions, my name on the wall, and space to grow. I accepted. My parents sent a short message 2 weeks after the show closed. They had sold one of their lake houses and were traveling through Europe. No apology, just an update. I stared at the message for a while, then archived it. I didn't need anything from them now. Instead, I made dinner with Riley on Sunday nights. We talked about work and books and the odd ways our childhood still echoed. Tyler stopped by once a week with espresso and news from the gallery. Frank brought me firewood in a crate stamped with the year he'd retired, and Doris dropped off baked oatmeal every third Thursday wrapped in a dish towel I still haven't returned. I started teaching a weekend workshop for young artists, mostly high schoolers. They came with sketchbooks, nerves, and big questions. I told them the truth. Sometimes the art world is cold, but the real warmth is in the work. One afternoon after class, I stood in the middle of my studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, brushes scattered across the sink, and sunlight spilled in through the east-facing window. I remembered that restaurant, the white tablecloth, the folded note, the feeling of being completely alone. And I thought about everything that came after. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single moment that fixed everything. But piece by piece, I rebuilt my life on my own terms with my own hands. And somewhere along the way, I found something stronger than approval. I found peace. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who should have supported you most, just to find your footing, then you're not alone. Sometimes the ones who call you a failure are only trying to keep you from rising. But once you do, once you take that first step toward yourself, you don't go back. You build something better. Thanks for being here. And if this story felt familiar, I hope you'll share yours too.